Welcome to another edition of ATL Prime Sports. I'm Jurjevich. Joining me this evening is our fabulous producer, Wayne Ridenauer in Memphis, Tennessee. And you can find us all at ATL Prime Sports on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And of course, please search on Apple and Spotify. You can find all of us personally on Twitter at JJ Get You One for myself, at RWY Junior for Wayne, at Corder Todd for TC Todd Corder, who is out at SIAC Media Days as we speak, and at LG for Real Though for Larry Gardner, who is down with the Rome Braves. Wayne, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing pretty well. It would have been nice if the American League could have pulled off another win in the All-Star game, but I have to say, I had the best time watching that, seeing all the Texas players out there playing a whole bunch of Atlanta players. It was, I feel like I'm getting a little bit of preview of what could be a World Series.
Well, I would love to see Texas and Atlanta play. There was at one point 6 Rangers on the field, so I know you were happy with that, Wayne. I'm doing great, not as well as the National League though. They won 3-2 in the old Midsummer Classic. That's their first win in the All-Star game since 2012. So Wayne, thanks for letting us have this one. All right, there were 8 Braves All-Stars. Uh, you got to see what 5 of them. At one point, you had 6
Yeah.
Rangers, and at one point, you had almost the whole entire Braves infield minus the catcher, Sean Murphy. So you saw Sean Murphy throw out a runner behind home plate, caught, I forget the runner who he caught stealing, but he threw it to Orlando RC, and it kind of looked like a normal Bally Sports broadcast. So I'm doing just great. What's on tap for today's show? We welcome back the voice of the Georgia State Panthers, Dave Cohen. We'll talk Sun Belt football and Georgia State football, and we'll reflect on our 3 favorite moments from the sports year, as it's kind of a dormant time right before football kicks off and the All-Star break, obviously. So without further ado, we welcome our guest, friend of the show. College football is right around the corner. What better way to start off the season than talking with friend of the show and voice of the Georgia State Panthers, Dave Cohen. You can find Dave on Twitter at GA State Voice. Dave, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming along, and how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Good to be back with you guys, and yeah, right around the corner. Things about to get busy with regards to college football. You got the various conference media days. The Sun Belt will be down in New Orleans in a couple weeks for 2 days of Sun Belt football media days, and then that first week in August will be here before you know it, and it'll be out at Center Park Stadium covering daily practice. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, Todd and I are getting ready for another SIAC football season. You mentioned it, the media days are coming and going right now as we speak. SIAC media days were earlier today. That's where Todd was. So we're gearing up as well. Well, let's talk some Georgia State football. Let's see. Well, actually, before we get into it, I do want to ask you this question. 2 Power 5 schools are having very different types of issues. Northwestern, the obvious hazing issue, and right here in the state of Georgia, the University of Georgia is having a speeding/racing problem, as we all know. Dave, my question to you is this: how much knowledge do you think a Power 5 or a Group of 5 Division I football coach has over what's going on in his locker room and off the field? I want to ask you this. You've been in the game a lot longer than I have. And to me, it's just, I don't know what a coach is supposed to do if they're not in the locker room 24/7 or around these guys somewhat close to often. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, one thing that's true is coaches, no matter what level you're coaching at, Division One, Division Two, Division Three, NAIA, you can't be watching over every student athlete every hour throughout the day. You have a little bit more, for lack of a better term, control over the situation involving your teams as a head coach once you're in season, once you're at practice, and they're working on a regular schedule. But once that regular schedule, the season ends, and things kind of become a little bit more, off season ish, so to say, they've got a lot of free time on their hands. And, especially at the SEC level, a lot of these student athletes, especially the ones that are bringing in now name, image, likeness money, can afford, nicer cars than you and I are driving. And, you get kids that are in that 18 to 22 years age, there's that feeling of invincibility. So they tend to maybe do things and not think about things in the same manner that you and I do. Um, in the situation at Northwestern, and I just base everything off the way I see things inside the circle at Georgia State, and without saying too much, and not that there's really anything going on, but I kind of find it hard to believe that head coaches, even by trickle down, uh, matters, don't know of certain things that are going on. Does Sean Elliott know what every Georgia State football player is doing every hour of the day? No. But if there's a situation where they get an inkling that, or any coach gets an inkling that something needs to be addressed, usually it filters down through your staff, um, position coaches, uh, director of operations guys. I mean, guys that are in around the office every day that would have a better, or an ear to the ground, maybe more so than the head coach would on a daily basis. At Northwestern, I don't know. I'm 50-50 on it. Could that kind of hazing go on, and the head coach not have any idea that that's going on? In other words, word doesn't get out at all. Nothing ends up on social media. Nobody sends an email, a warning email, nothing like that. Again, I'm not there at Northwestern, so I don't know, but I find it hard to believe. Again, I'm 50-50. I understand they can't be around the student athletes all day, every day. But something like that, that's pervasive in your program, to me is awfully hard to not have any inkling or any knowledge about at all, based on the way we communicate now, whether it's in person, via email, social media, what have you. Let's put it this way. Let me put it to you this way. Somehow the student newspaper at Northwestern found out about it and broke the story, when coaches at Northwestern say they had no idea.
Yeah.
Good point.
It's, as far as what I would say about it is, and the only thing I can relate to is my experience in college marching band. We had a band director who had a zero tolerance policy. And he would always give this, what we called the Katie bar the door speech at the beginning of the year. And you knew that if you did anything that violated the terms of your agreement with the marching band, that you would be out of the band, period. No questions asked, no second chance. And that kind of regulated our activities and what we would decide to do and not to do. And I know it's rough for a coach to have to do that. Let's say one of their star players were to violate a policy and you just kick him out. But if you know going into it that could happen, I think the student athletes would probably better regulate themselves instead of running the risk of losing everything, especially if they've got some big NIL money. I can remember on one trip we took to either Nashville or Knoxville, halfway there, the buses all pulled over. And we're like, why are we pulling over? One kid gets off the bus's doors close, and then it goes on. Well, found out later he got kicked out of the band because he was drinking on the bus. And there was no cell phones or anything back then. They just dropped him off the side of the road. He's an adult, and they took off. And they're like, hey, you're no longer here. Find your way home.
Wow.
Well,
That is a lesson to be learned right there. Now, Dave, I share the same feelings as you. I'm 50-50 on the issue. I don't know how, and let's just take Kirby Smart's situation. I don't know how Kirby Smart's supposed to get these kids to stop, I say kids, young adults to stop speeding unless he's in the car with them. He's brought in law enforcement. And then the opposite over in Chicago and Northwestern, I do find it hard to believe that he didn't have at least a little inkling of what's going on, whether it's been clamoring, joking about it, anything along those lines. So I'm right there with you. I'm 50-50. But what is a coach supposed to do? Our own Todd Corder had Alan Judge from the AJC on a Twitter Spaces a couple weeks ago, and he asked those similar questions. So it's up in the air on what a coach is supposed to do in that situation, I guess. But as the CEO, for lack of a better term, of each program, you're the face, and you're supposed to have a grasp on what your program's doing. So that will take me on to our next questions. These are all now Georgia State related. Let's start on the offensive side of the football. That wasn't the problem last year. Lost, 4 or 5 games by 1 possession, under 7 points. You lose Jamari Thrash to the transfer portal. Darren Granger's back. Robert Lewis is back. How will the loss of Jamari Thrash impact the offensive side of the ball this fall, Dave?
Well, I think push comes to shove, maybe not as much as we thought when the news about Thrash came out. And I'll say because Robert Lewis is back and will make a nice target. Jakari Carter transferred in from Merrimack with some pretty good numbers. He's a pretty good kid. I've had a chance to talk to him a couple of 3 times, and I think that he will be an impact player for Darren Granger. And then you can throw in, you can throw in the tight ends, Chris Bird, Amon Green, Jakias Cradle is a big target as well as a wide receiver. So I think, one thing that Georgia State's always had going for him is plenty of receivers. Talik Williams is back. Kadarius Thompson is back. There's a lot of guys who will see their roles increase a little bit as we move into the 14th season of Georgia State football. The one area that to me is the biggest question mark on the offensive side, and this is an A and a B answer. Number one, along the offensive line, because we did lose, some familiar faces along the offensive line. Pat Bartlett exhausted his eligibility. Bryson Broadway transferred to the other Division I school down south in the Sun Belt Conference. We got a couple of familiar faces back, but the B part of that answer is the running game. Tucker Gregg exhausted his eligibility, and Jamias Williams, our Batman and Robin of running backs, both are gone because they exhausted their eligibility. So Marcus Carroll now takes the mantle and assumes the number 1 running back spot with KZ Adams. And KZ is maybe the fastest player on the team. Not big in physical stature, but he makes up for it with his ability to run the football and show a lot of speed. The question is, can that offensive line continue to open up the kind of holes that KZ will need to run in between the tackles? If not, then Georgia State will have to identify a number 2 or a number 3 that can be more of a Tucker Gregg-like power runner. They did bring in a guy, Freddie Brock, from a transfer from the University of Maine. Again, coming in with good numbers. We'll see how things play out by the time we get to the end of fall practice and get ready for August 31 when they take on Rhode Island. I have all the confidence in the world in Marcus Carroll after watching him run and the numbers he put up while he was in games. Again, he was really 3rd on the depth chart, but he really had a breakout game in Georgia State's win at Southern Miss last year. So I think KZ Adams and Freddie Brock are 2 of the names that you'll see battling for that number 2. I've not seen Brock run in person yet, so I'm not as familiar with him, but KZ did score 4 touchdowns in the spring game, so he kind of showed what his ability. But that offensive line, to me, is of utmost importance and priority as we head into fall practice, and then we'll see how the running back competition behind Marcus Carroll plays out. As far as Darren Granger, ended up leading us in rushing, or is one of the top 3 rushers last year. He's got another year of experience under his belt, and he's got a lot of receivers, a lot of targets between receivers and tight ends to throw to.
Yeah,
Granger, go ahead, Wayne.
I was going to say, y'all have got a freshman quarterback down there from Bartlett High School right here in Memphis, Tennessee. Braylon Ragland, I think it's yeah. So I'm kind of excited to see if he gets in the game at some point, or if I have to wait for next year or something.
Well, that will be another one of the competitions as to who wins that backup quarterback spot, and that will be big as well because whoever it is not going to have a bunch of experience under their
No,
belt.
no, because I think both of them are freshmen that's running for that job. The other guy's out of what, Roswell, Georgia?
Yeah, he's former Roswell Hornet.
Right.
But yeah, so there's a lot of inexperience, so to say, battling it out for that number 2 quarterback spot, unless something changes between now and then.
You're listening to Dave Cohen right here on ATL Prime Sports. You can find Dave on Twitter at GA State Voice. Flip over to the defensive side of the ball right quick, Dave. A few Power 5 transfers from the ACC and a new defensive coordinator. What can Panthers fans expect from the new DC Chad Staggs, who comes over from conference rival Coastal Carolina?
Yeah, I've had a chance to talk with him on a couple of different occasions. I think it is definitely a benefit that he comes in, like you said, from Coastal Carolina. So it's not like you're bringing in a guy from another conference who has no idea what to expect from the opponent week in and week out in the Sun Belt Conference. He basically transitioned from one defense into Georgia State's defense. So from that standpoint, I feel pretty good about it. For the Panthers, when you look at some of the defensive numbers, and I've got some of them here in front of me, again, we went 4-8 last year, but lost games that we very well could have won. Georgia State averaged 30 points a game, but allowed 31. So obviously that number, the second number's got to come down. You can't allow 31 points a ball game. That's going to really, inhibit your ability to try to get to that 6-win total, especially with the caliber of the schedule that Georgia State is playing. But in my eyes, the defense kind of builds in and around. You got your D-line, you got your linebackers and your rush ends, and then, of course, you got your DBs. The experience there, and what makes me feel good about our defense is Jordan Venzial is back. Led the Panthers with tackles last year with 98, had a couple of sacks and 3 fumble recoveries, and he's a real go-getter. And right next to him, knock on wood, coming back from injury, will be Blake Carroll. And those two have a lot of experience. They're kind of the Batman and Robin, for lack of a better term, on the defensive side of the football. But there were some key losses. Antavius Lane transferred out. I believe he's gone to North Carolina. He might have been one of the best safeties that's played at Georgia State in what was the 13 seasons of Panther football. He had 87 tackles last year, a couple of interceptions. Jameel Muhammad, who had a really good season 2 years ago, transferred to the University of Southern California. Jeffrey Clark followed our former defensive coordinator to Cincinnati along the D-line. That's a big loss. And Thomas Gore was a big loss on the defensive line. He's down at Miami with the Hurricanes. So Javon Dennis is back. But again, along that defensive line, the competition is going to be of the utmost importance. The other thing that makes you feel good is an impact player, Kevin Swint, coming in from Clemson. Had a chance to talk to him, see him play in the spring game, and had a chance to talk to him afterwards. He looks like he's the real deal. He's about 6'5", 6'6".
Big guy.
He's a big, big dude, and I think is going to be a real impact player for Georgia State, along with another guy who's gotten much better since he got to Georgia State, and I don't really know him that well, but Shamar McCullum, who transferred in from Wake Forest prior to last year. 45 tackles, 9 for loss, and 4.5, so basically 5 sacks a year ago. I think that he and Kevin Swint could really be a 1-2 punch as far as putting pressure on the quarterback and contributing to that takeaway number, which was at 25 last year. Javon Dennis is back. Jontre Hunter, don't let me forget about Jontre Hunter. Also there along with McCullum and with Swint. Right in that mix of those guys that are going to rush from the outside and put pressure on the quarterback. So I feel good about the defense, but that number has got to come down. If you're averaging 30 and giving up 31, that's not a number. That's right. You're right there at about 50-50. And, we lost some close games last year. Charlotte should never have lost to Charlotte at home. Lost to Louisiana Monroe at home. If you just win those 2 games, you're at 6 wins, and more than likely you're one of the 7 Sun Belt teams that reached a bowl game last year. And 6-6, as you know, sounds a whole lot better than 4-8. So we've got experience back, a lot of experience back on both sides of the ball. You mentioned from a transfer portal uh, position. Again, guys, we lost Jamari Thrash to Louisville. Had a couple of guys, one or two guys come in from Louisville. Had an offensive lineman come in from Central Michigan. Again, on the defensive side, Swint comes in from Clemson. There are guys that have come in that I'm hoping that will be impact players because, look, with the transfer portal, coaches are not bringing in transfers to not play and not make an impact.
Correct.
So at the end of the day, when you add up the numbers, the transfer portal players that we lost, and we lost some good ones, the ones that we're bringing in are going to have to come in and make an impact and be able to get on the field right away and get the job done.
And the cornerback from Clemson's well coached under Dabo Swinney and partially coached by Brent Venable before he took off to Oklahoma. So you got a well coached athletic guy that was a top 300 ESPN recruit a couple of years ago. And you mentioned the talent that left. They're not going to power group of 5 schools. Every single guy you mentioned went to the Power 5 level. And it just goes to show you what the transfer portal does for the Power 5 guys and vice versa for the group of 5 guys. You get guys that come down, maybe didn't get the playing time they were expected out of high school, and they get a secondary chance here to make an opportunity at the next level, which is hopefully the NFL and those 2 Power 5 transfers from the ACC. Let's talk about this schedule for a little bit, Dave. 3 winnable games to open up the season, 2 of them at home to start the year off with Rhode Island and UConn. Now, UConn's no slouch that they used to be. Jim Mora Jr. takes over, gets into a bowl game right away, instantaneously makes a uncompetitive program a competitive program. Talk about the schedule and where you think they could fall. We posted the article on our ATL Prime Sports Fan Zone Facebook page. Georgia State football win total. Can the Panthers reach a bowl game by Bennett Conlin? We posted that on the Facebook account. You can go check that out again. But where do you think this team could fall at the end of the season? Obviously, a tough trip to Death Valley in early November at the end of the year. But to open up conference play, you got Coach Stagg's former school in Coastal Carolina. So first 4 games of the year, I think all 4 of those games can be winnable if the defense does improve. Your thoughts on the schedule and where you think Georgia State can land at the end of the year?
Well, first off, the crazy thing about opening up at Coastal Carolina, I think in the last 5 seasons, the road team has won each game. So this would be Georgia State going, and when we beat Coastal Carolina over there 2 years ago, I believe it was 42-40, had a goal line stand late in the ball game, and they were ranked in the top 25 when we beat them. So this would be a game that for Coach Staggs, he's taking his first Georgia State defense back into Conway, South Carolina. And look, at the end of the day, he'd love to get out of Conway and out of that stadium with a W. But you're right, before that, and let me say this as well, in each of the last 2 years, I'm just referencing the last 2 seasons, Georgia State has dug themselves in a hole early in the season.
Yes.
Now, 2 years ago, a 1-4 start with a fantastic finish to get to 7 regular season wins and a win in the Camellia Bowl 2 years ago now, a win in the Camellia Bowl on Christmas Day over Ball State. That 8-win season was the best so far in the 13 seasons we've been playing. Everyone surrounding the program thought that was a little bit of a launching pad and that last year would maybe go up to 8, maybe 9 wins or maybe 10 wins. Yeah. Well, we got off to another tough start and dug ourselves in a hole. And, the difference was we lost at South Carolina, came this close to beating North Carolina at Center Park Stadium, but we didn't. We lost by a touchdown. But then lost to Charlotte And Charlotte ended up starting the season at 1-7, and their only win was against us in Atlanta in a shootout, 42-41. Can't have losses like that. We, Georgia State, the program, can't afford to get off this year again to 1-3 or 1-4 start. Because as you mentioned, first of all, as we've talked about before, in my opinion, the Sun Belt East is the best division in G5 football right now. And it's probably going to always be like that. There's not an easy game, in the schedule.
To piggyback on your point there, Dave, I'll go one step further. I'll say the Sun Belt now owns the title of the best Group of Five conference now that Houston and Cincinnati are in the Big 12. You won't change my mind there. I think this is the best Group of Five football there is in the country. So I agree with you 100%.
And the American lost to Central Florida as well. Yep. So they lost their 3 best football teams. So Rhode Island, you've got to absolutely beat Rhode Island. It's an FCS opponent. You got UConn in Atlanta. You got to win that game.
Got to.
You got to go to Charlotte and beat Charlotte. I mean, a 3-0 start would be fantastic. Obviously, it's never been done, because then you open up on the road at Coastal Carolina in week 4. And it's the same thing. You're playing Coastal Carolina, you're playing Marshall, you're playing James Madison, you're playing Appalachian State, you're playing Georgia Southern, you're playing Old Dominion, you're playing at Louisiana, the best, one of the better teams in the Sun Belt West. Well, what were they last year? They didn't have a great year, but Louisiana historically is one of the better teams in the West. Troy has kind of taken that
conference last year, 6-7 overall.
Yeah, Troy and South Alabama, last year kind of took over. They emerged to the top in the Sun Belt West. But historically, at least for us, and we haven't beaten the Ragin' Cajuns yet, either in Atlanta or in Lafayette. And we've got to go I believe we're at Lafayette this year. So,
correct.
Once we get past Charlotte, and including, as you said, hanging way out there in November, a trip to Baton Rouge against LSU, there's not a game that you look at and say, oh, yeah, we got a really good chance to win that game. I'm going to go into every one of those games hoping that we can play well enough to win, but not having the same feeling that I would have against, say, a Rhode Island. That's a game that Georgia State should win. I'll go 50-50 on every game after Charlotte, because who knows if we can go to Coastal Carolina. What's his face? The quarterback, he's back for another year.
Yeah.
Harrison McCall.
McCall, yes.
And he's the straw that stirs the drink. And our former receiver, Sam Pinckney, is back over there for another season. Historically, in the last 2-3 years, Coastal Carolina has been one of the faces as a program of Sun Belt Conference football. So I'm not going to put it past them that they're not going to have another productive season. Can we go over there and beat them? No question. But I'm not penciling that in as a W. I'm not penciling in a W or an L in any game after Charlotte.
That's such a tough schedule. But the bright spot is you do have Marshall, App State, James Madison, and of course, I believe Troy is at home as well. So 4 of your tougher games, of course, going by last year's conference standings, are at home. Well, Dave, that about wraps us up for time. I want to say thanks for coming on. I think Wade had one more closing comment for you, and then we'll get you on out of here.
Well, the only I would really appreciate it if you could find it in your heart to convince your team to beat Charlotte in that game, because they're in our conference now, and it sure would be nice if they had one loss early on.
Well, that would certainly make my day. We should have beaten them last year, and their quarterback had a career day against us at our place and beat us 42-41. It was a great game.
Yeah.
Of fans, not necessarily at Georgia State, but if you're a fan and you were watching that game, that was a shootout. Again, it was a total of 83 points. It was a fun game to watch. More so if you're a Charlotte fan, less so if you're a Georgia State fan. But if you're just a college football fan and you came across that game, that was an entertaining game to watch. But you're right, we need to return the favor when we get over to Charlotte in week 3. I'm with you on that, Wayne.
That's Dave Cohen, voice of the Georgia State Panthers. You can find Dave on Twitter at GA State Voice. Dave, before we let you go, tell our listeners how they can catch the call August 31st at 7 p.m. at Center Park Stadium versus Rhode Island.
Well, we're not there yet, but we're getting closer. We'll be same flagship in Atlanta, 88.5 FM WRES. It's a 50,000 watt FM right here in Atlanta, Georgia. It's also streaming, obviously, and you can you can access it by tuneinradio.com. Our affiliate in Gainesville, Georgia, with a lot of Georgia State coverage, also streaming at tuneinradio.com. WGTJ, you can listen on their website as well. Lowcountryradio.com out of Savannah, Georgia. Should be back on the Georgia State Network again. And, of course, another way is download the Georgia State Athletics mobile app to your iPhone or your iPad. And each game day, it says listen live. All you got to do is tap it. And what do they say? Tap that app, and the Georgia State radio crew will be right there with you. You can take Georgia State's radio crew with you wherever you go, as long as you got that iPhone or iPad.
Isn't it great? Technology's just so dandy now. I love it. Well, Dave, we always appreciate you, and we thank you for coming on, and we love your insight. Dave Cohen, voice of the Georgia State Panthers. Again, you can find him on Twitter at GA State Voice. Thanks, Dave. We'll see you next week.
I appreciate it, guys. Always a pleasure.
Always. All right, Wayne, that wraps up our Georgia State football segment. Let's go talk a little bit about the year in sports in general in honor of the ESPY Awards, which is airing, I think, as we speak. Give me your top 3 moments from the 2022-2023 sports year. Wayne, I'm going with you first, man. Give me one, then I'll do one, and we'll go back and forth. We'll have a little fun with it.
All right. Now, these are not in any necessary order.
Yeah, no order, just 3 of them.
All right. Well, I would say one of them would have to be University of Memphis Tigers beating the Houston Cougars in the AAC basketball conference championship game. That was
well, I got the hat on. I knew you'd get me a Memphis one in there, and I love it. No, that was a great game, exciting game, back and forth. Houston had beaten them twice prior, and I think this was in the conference tournament, right?
Right. Final of the conference tournament.
So we were both talking about they needed that win. If they get that win, they're probably guaranteed a spot in the tournament. So, yeah, that was extremely exciting. Do you want to add on to that one yet, or you want me to go with mine?
No, go ahead and go with yours.
All right, I'll go with mine. Again, no particular order. Let's go with the 15-0 season with the Georgia Bulldogs capping off with a 65-7 win over TCU for back-to-back national championships. I mean, that had to be on there, right? I mean, as a Georgia fan here, the whole time, if you're a Georgia fan, you're hearing, oh, they can't win the big one. They can't win the big one. Well, they just won 2 in a row. They've won more championship trophies than they have losses in the last 2 years. So that's extremely exciting for me. I'll go, then you go this time around. My second one, it's got to be the Damar Hamlin injury and the process of him being now cleared to play in the NFL for this upcoming season. Hats off. You brought the whole country together, Damar, and it was awesome. God was with everyone, and people were unified in prayer. And Wayne, that was my favorite. No doubt about it, my favorite memory. Not the injury itself, but the way America unified in prayer and silence and togetherness, all for this one player to just get back up and get out there and play football again. And it was just magnificent. So, Mr. Hamlin, I love the news. Your story really inspired me. And I just want to say thank you to beating the odds and doing something that brought the whole country together. And last but not least, now you get to continue your dream playing football, and you're a healthy young man and you get a secondary chance. And I absolutely love it. That's my number 2. Wayne, what's your number 2, buddy?
Well, my number 2, of course, I like watching the stock cars, and the big memory from last year in the stock cars was Ross Chastain's video game move at the final chance
Yes.
for him to get into the championship, and just going flat out right up against the wall and skating that wall around and making it into the playoffs, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that was impressive. We talked about it as one of our opening moments on this show. And it was a video. I mean, that is literally Days of Thunder stuff. Speaking of which, I've heard they're in process of making a Days of Thunder 2 34 years later.
Yeah, they have not called
about Cole Trickle making a comeback.
Yeah, they hadn't called me to do any type of stunt work for that either. So just, my phone is on the hook, ready for you to call anytime.
Hey, me too, Tom. Me too. If you need a stunt double, I got you.
Yeah.
All right, my number 2, DeMar Hamlin. Let's go. Give me your number 3, then I'll go back.
All right. Well, my number 3 is going to go back to the Hall of Fame inductions for Major League Baseball in 2022. And David Ortiz's speech and his induction, I think that was a pretty big deal, and I enjoyed that. And he was even at the All-Star game hogging all the popcorn, so I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, Big Papi, one of the best personalities in all of baseball. No matter how much you dislike the Red Sox or the Yankees, you got to love Big Papi and Derek Jeter, and they made that All-Star game pretty fun last night. My number 3, it's got to be with them Atlanta Braves right here. You see my Atlanta Brave gnome. You see the tomahawk. You can't really see the tomahawk right now, but it's back there. But it's got to be the Braves catching the New York Mets in the NL East after the New York media claimed the NL East is over. Over. Well, I'm not going to do that this year because I think the Marlins could contend in the NL East still, and I think the Mets may even make their way back into the race. But yeah, that was just a great memory. The Braves down to the wire. I personally think that is the reason they did not do well in the playoffs, is they exhausted all their options to catch the Mets in that NL East championship, and I think it kind of cost them in the playoffs. But that is my number 3 memory. And I'll go with an honorable mention. And my honorable mention is the Kelsey brothers playing in the Super Bowl together. That was absolutely fun, seeing all the content on their podcast leading up to the Super Bowl. Their mom on the field having the split Jason Kelsey, Travis Kelsey jersey. It was just awesome. Good family moment, wholesome moment. You got to see the mom's side from both of it. She was cheering for the offense the whole time, and you see her face at the end of it. She goes and consoles Jason, who lost. Jason saying, "No, go celebrate with Travis. No, Mom, be happy for him." So I just thought that was awesome. So that's my honorable mention. You didn't have to have one, but if you got one, shoot.
Well, I didn't think of an honorable mention, so everything else is honorable mention.
I like it. Well, that concludes our show. Let's get to our final thoughts for the evening. Wayne, I'll sign us off. You go ahead and start this one off.
Well, football's not too far away, but I can tell you right now, everybody in my family, some of my friends were already talking about college football. So, maybe it's because their baseball teams aren't doing so well. But, I'm still talking Texas Rangers here. I'm not ready for football yet.
Yeah, neither am I. I'm really intrigued by this Braves roster from top to bottom. The home runs they hit, the defense they play, the pitching, leading Major League Baseball in team ERA. I am just like you, Wayne. I want this season to never end. It has just been so fun. Hats off to the rule changes. They have really sped up play and increased viewership across Major League Baseball. But my final thought is Major League Baseball will play 3 series internationally next year. The Dodgers and Pirates will play a 2-game set to open the season next year on March 20th and 21st. That will be in Seoul, South Korea, excuse me. The other two series is going to be a Red Sox-Rays spring training series in the Dominican Republic on March 9th and 10th, and a Mets-Phillies regular season series in London, England, or the Austin Powers way, London, England. Pretty cool to see Major League Baseball growing internationally. That is our show. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like the content, please like, please subscribe, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and of course, YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. For Wayne in Memphis, for Todd in the north side of Atlanta, Larry in Adairsville, I'm JJ Jurjevich. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Get you one.